I'm Aria Schwartz alongside Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. We are in the heat of it. 2 of the 5 semifinals games are in the books, so let's dive right in and discuss. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. That's patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we're doing covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. Welcome back to the show. Excited to be here for our second ever video show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. Forget the technical terms. I'm excited. We finally are getting a intense, high intensity, high blood pressure, high heart rate final or WNBA playoff series. I'm excited. I know you're excited. We're going to talk about the series that's 2-0 first, and then we'll get into the little bit closer one. But Rachel, we're less than 24 hours removed from Game 2 of the WNBA semifinals. Where's your head at? Where are your emotions? And honestly, for the first time in the WNBA season, I'm jealous of you because I could not fall asleep for so long last night because I was so wired from the games. But you're like 2 hours behind me, so it wasn't as annoying probably for you.
I wasn't as wired last night. I don't know what it was. I was in a I don't know, a reflective mood. I was really tired last night for some reason. So I wasn't as amped up as I typically can be after getting a chance to watch some semifinal games. Where's my head at with it? A little disappointed, a little excited. Looking forward to Friday to see what can be done. I'm losing a little bit of hope that both of these will end up being stretched to 5 games. I think it's easy to look at Las Vegas and New York and that one get a lot of attention. But to me, I think it's really starting to show the real chess match and the real the more interesting one to me, just from a stylistic perspective, is Connecticut and Minnesota, because it's just so fascinating to watch those two teams. And obviously both of them are incredibly exciting, fun to watch. But for whatever reason, I'm really gravitating, just as a basketball former coach, whatever, like just watching that matchup and analyzing it in all the different ways that we can. I'm not too surprised about the outcomes last night. I definitely did not see Minnesota losing 2 at home. Las Vegas, backs against the wall now, without a shadow of a doubt, going down to New York. The good news is, and probably the only good news for them right now, is going back to Vegas. But I would have to see. I'm sure someone's tweeted about it. When was the last time somebody came back, from down 2 and were able to win a series? Now, this is just in the case of a 5-game series, which I know we don't have a huge sample size. But yeah, Las Vegas, you just start to really look at it. You don't feel that. You just don't feel. This feels like it's becoming every single day a much greater mountain to climb. And then you've got some unfortunate news of Kia Stokes going down with a concussion. Well, a potential concussion. I haven't seen an official report on that, but how long does that? They don't have time to be missing her. So, yeah, let's dive into New York and Vegas and just kind of recap the game and where this series is at right now. How are you feeling after that game?
I agree with you. I think the way you put it a moment ago, and I'm not even going to try and butcher it, but the mountain keeps getting bigger for the Aces. You're not getting closer and closer to the top. It almost seems similar to that Greek theology of the guy rolling the boulder up the mountain and then it goes right back down and you start right over. That's almost how it seems with the Aces. Look, coming into the game 2, I think you want to get an idea. Somebody had to win game 1. New York won game 1 handedly over the Aces. You knew the Aces were going to come back with a little bit more fire. But the question was, would that fire be enough? And how long would that fire last, right? How long would that fire burn? And watching the game, they come out hot. They're looking good early in the game. And then the game kind of settles into the game. The early quarter moments kind of calm down. It's kind of like opening a can of pop or whatever. The bubblies happen and then it kind of settles down. You still get some spurts, but it settles down. And that's when New York took their advantage. And then I think you and I were texting. I was texting somewhere, maybe it was in the Winsidr Slack, and everyone was like, Aces are toast, it's over. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like Asia Wilson's going to do some Asia Wilson things. And she did. And she led her team back into it. It got interesting. It was a back and forth. I believe it got tied at certain points late in the fourth. If not, they were one free throw by Tip Hayes away from tying it super late in the game. It just seemed like the Aces ran out of gas. There was missed layups. I know Becky talked about it post game. I mean, Asia
Yeah.
Wilson did amazing things, but we can't ignore that Asia Wilson also missed some good looks that could have changed the outcome of this game. And just overall, it seems to me, and I'm probably going to repeat this when we talk about the other series, but it seems to me that like we're being confirmed in who these teams are and what we saw throughout the whole season. The Aces were always a step behind the top dog contenders in my mind. They showed flashes that they could do it, but this game too, it just showed it. Even when they really, the urgency is there, the pedals to the metal. Asia Wilson is just going Super Saiyan mode, and it still wasn't enough. And I'm not
Yeah.
even looking at New York and thinking that New York played like such a perfect New York game. That's
Right.
not a knock to them. It just seemed like the Aces were not able to overcome the challenges put in front of them. I'm curious for you, like, was it that encompassing, or was it just like, I don't know. When you think about the Aces, Rachel, like, do you get drawn into this idea of they just aren't a good enough team, or their players aren't performing good enough, or like, how do you kind of divvy it up in your mind when a team that's as good as the Aces, who are looking for a three-peat, come up short?
It feels like they just don't have enough. That's the best way I can explain it. Whether it's talent wise, performance wise, depth wise. Like when I watch, and it's just the feeling the game gives me, you just get the sense of Vegas they just don't have enough in comparison to what New York brings to the table.
Mhm.
And the amount of weapons and the depth, and that's been New York's greatest strength all season long. And the versatility they have and the different ways in which they're able to play and exploit mismatches, and especially defensively, how New York has been playing. I think this is they're playing their best defense of the season right now. Now I haven't looked at specific numbers with that. That's just a feel of watching this team, and primarily how difficult they're making Asia Wilson's life, and how difficult they're making Las Vegas's life to get her clean opportunities. And their size, their length, they're huge. They are huge, and the Aces talked about it last night in the postgame. Becky Hammond did, about just how big they are and how that length is so disruptive from top to bottom. And then you've got a matchup of like Kelsey Plum and Fibich, and it's just, again, it goes back to me. It's just there doesn't feel like there's enough. Um, in game two, and specifically Las Vegas, okay, you come out hot, you're feeling good, everyone's like, yeah, we're getting going, Chelsea Gray's hitting some shots, and then you go to the third quarter and you just, you get waxed by 9 points, you get outscored 24-13 in that second quarter, excuse me. So, and then everything else was relatively even. So you can't have these massive lapses in which the Aces had in that second quarter, and then you get down to the wire at the end of the game, and you get the best player in the WNBA the looks that she needs to get. I mean, she had a 15-footer that didn't go down. Then she had, that kind of layup around the rim look that didn't fall. So if either of those fall, and if that out of bounds deflection call wasn't overturned, it could easily be a different scenario. I mean, that's the fascinating point about this game, is just being a 2-possession game. A couple of calls, a couple of shots go down, it is a different outcome. But I just kind of look at that second quarter, because, we always think about the last few possessions and what could have gone wrong, or what didn't go right, or what the refs did wrong. But the Aces couldn't allow them to dig a hole the way they did the second quarter, and also to get beat 44-24 in the points in the paint. That was the most glaring statistic to me, just like team statistics, that these are two teams that in the course of the WNBA season, percentage of points in the paint, New York, they're not top of the league because of their ability to shoot. But it's not like, they're relatively close, right in that. I think it's like 8 and 10 in terms of their percentage of points in the paint. So that number should be even. It should be relatively even, or at least somewhat reasonably close. 44 to what was it that I said before? 44-24. That is a big differential. And I think that speaks to New York's defense and how disruptive they've been and how they really tried to force A'ja Wilson 15 to 17 feet away from the basket. And she really has not been able to get herself going. Her teammates haven't been able to give her the looks that she's accustomed to. And again, it's not as much, it's not a knock on Wilson, but it's a credit to New York and their defensive schemes. They've been on point. And in a game that's going to come down to a couple of different possessions, and maybe a non-call here or there down the stretch, that's the bigger difference. Is Vegas has not been able to make adjustments to get A'ja Wilson to her spots, to get her rolling in the way she needs to get rolling. And here we are, and then as I said before, Sabrina Ionescu has been the X factor. I said it the last time we did this show. We put the little clip out there, and I was like, man, I really hope I sound smart and I know what I'm talking about. And in the first 2 games, you're like, dang, like Sabrina is the X factor here. And the way she's been producing, 24 points last night, leading all scorers, knocking down perimeter shots. But then I said with Las Vegas, there's really no room for error. There's not a lot of room for someone to have an off night. It doesn't mean Asia's got to put up 40. She doesn't need to put up 40. She still had 24. Even Chelsea Gray giving you 14. Tiffany Hayes giving you 10. Everybody, it was a balanced scoring attack from Las Vegas last night, but then you got Kelsey Plum with just 6. I always have felt like, whether from the big 4, especially when you look at Jackie Young and Kelsey Plum, that both of them have to be able to perform. Both of them have to contribute in ways. And it feels like when this team is struggling, there's one of them that's a little bit off. There's one that's struggling a little bit. But I'm rambling at this point. My biggest takeaway is it's not necessarily about who didn't score, who struggled offensively, because look, it was a high scoring game in the 80s. I just think more than anything, we got to look at the defense. And you got to look at just that second quarter from Las Vegas where they dug themselves a bit of a hole.
Well, yeah, and the few points that I want to point out is, one, Sabrina has become no longer a liability defensively, and that has been we can talk about the additions of Fibic, Kenny Burke, Sloot coming off the bench, this and that, the team cohesiveness better together, but the players have also grown, right? And that was something that a lot of people have kind of either kept their mouth shut or kept their eyes on for this season and for the early seasons in Sabrina's career. And I think we've seen a concentrated effort from her, and I think she deserves some flowers in what she's been able to do defensively, because it's great to have size that they have, and they can add different players here and there to add a little bit more length and a little bit more, versatility. But their main issue, if we go back, Rachel, going into the finals last year, was New York's not going to be able to defensively impact Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and Jackie Young. There's just no answer they have. Vandersloot is not going to do enough defensively against them. Saab is not going to do enough defensively against them. Obviously, they've made rotations and gotten Fibic in there in that starting 5. But I think, at least for me, a huge aspect of it is Sabrina's ability to be a legitimate defender and impact what the Vegas Aces are trying to do offensively with her defense. And also Courtney Vandersloot coming off the bench, that's almost like a cheat code.
No, you're right. We haven't really focused on that, and I think we should, first and foremost, to be able to make that type of adjustment at this point of your career. Hats off to Courtney Vandersloot, who will go down in history as one of the best point guards in WNBA history, for sure. We all can agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on whatever, if it's a mismatch thing, if it's just a game scheme type of decision, I mean, unbelievable. It was really actually rewarding, and I was so excited to witness that. Courtney Vandersloot, it's been a rough year, losing her mom, missing a portion of the season, and we all know what Courtney Vandersloot's capable of, from her ability to create to her ability to score. And it's like, that's the thing, you've got so many weapons on this team and so much experience on this team, especially when you got a player like Courtney Vandersloot, who's a WNBA champion, who knows what it takes to be in these moments. And I mean, Vegas doesn't have that coming off the bench. Vegas hardly has anything coming off the bench. And so it's like that starting 5 has got to be flawless. New York, they can have some room for someone to struggle or have an off shooting night, because there's 4 other people who can come in and make plays and get things done. And that's what this time of year is about. It's playmaking. It's playmaking. It's knocking down big shots. It's having poise, and it's having luck. And for 2 games so far, and again, I think that Las Vegas, that's a deflating loss last night, for the way it went down. I think when you look at the 40 minutes, you really were like, okay, New York's in control. They're going to win this game. I know there was a bunch of lead changes in the start of in the first half, but in the totality of the game, you really felt like, okay, New York has this. But Vegas, man, I mean, they did everything they could. Asia Wilson threw the team on her back down the stretch, and they kept it relatively close. You just kind of wondered, could they have some luck? Could that out of bounds deflection call have gone their way? Which to me is questionable at best, depending on the angle they were showing us. It was that was an interesting call, to say the least, and ultimately probably lost them the game. But one thing down the stretch goes a little bit differently, and Aces were able to steal this, and we're feeling a little bit different. But I just step back from these first 2 games, and it feels like the way we started this conversation, Vegas just doesn't have enough. They're chasing New York, and if New York is in control of this series because they have the talent, they have the depth. Becky Hammond said it last night. They probably feel like, we came in here last year and stole something from them. And how much luck can Vegas possibly have? I mean, last year losing Gray, and I think it was Stokes down the stretch, and in trying to go in there and win a game when they probably shouldn't have won, but they did, and they win a championship, and New York is sitting there dumbfounded. How did they beat us? I mean, New York has that chip. They have that edge. And it's like Becky Hammond's presser last night. I know she made the comment about, everybody's pissed off and we're sitting here in commercials. I know that might frustrate some people, but like, she's not wrong. We have not seen this Las Vegas team in its entirety play with that consistent edge and that chip on their shoulder all season long. And so they should chase New York. They should be chasing New York because they don't have the same fire and determination as New York right now. That's just human nature at this point. And so I don't know. At this point, I'm just hoping that Vegas doesn't get swept, just from a pride perspective. What do you think, though? I mean, I feel like I know this Aces team enough that they're going to go back home, and they're going to be able to steal a win on Friday.
I have to think they get a win. Would I be completely dumbfounded, shocked if this goes? If they're swept? No, not at all. But I fully anticipate. I don't think. No.
Really? You don't think this goes to 5 at all?
I don't think this goes to 5. No. And if I'm being blunt, I didn't think it was necessarily going to go to 5 when it started. I don't know. Maybe there's something about this season that I've had less second guessing than I personally have had in most recent years. And I'm a little bit more comfortable and confident in my takes of what we've seen throughout the whole season. I feel like the Aces had that element of what if, but we know it's not happening. Maybe they get lightning in a bottle, but you're not going to get that 3 games in a row. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. To bring up what you were saying before, I believe during the games, I heard teams that are 2-0 in a series in the W are 18-0, or maybe it's 18-2. It's something ridiculous. It's 18 and a number nowhere near it. So that's just something to think about. And the other thing I want to talk about, or not necessarily talk about, but just give some more love to Courtney Vandersloot, is the part of, at least in my mind, the genius that Sandy's doing by bringing Courtney off the bench is that Courtney Vandersloot is not known for being the most athletic speedster at this point in her career. And she's going up against a very athletic Las Vegas Aces team. So what do? You put the more athletic guard, forward guard, whatever you want to call it, wing, in the starting lineup, exhaust the Aces a little bit more, and then you bring in your vet who's super savvy when they're a little bit on their back heel, when it's less about speed, because we all know the Aces love to get up tempo early in the game, and then they kind of settle in and they kind of ride these waves of let's sprint a little, let's chill out, let's sprint a little. So I love the move. I think that's a vet move by Sandy, preparing her team for what I think will be a back-to-back finals run. I want to remind our friends, our listeners, before we get on to our next team, we're doing a giveaway. We're partnering with Homage, giving away a WNBA team hoodie and a t-shirt of your choosing, you being the winner. All you have to do is email us, REA@winsidr.com, and share with us your favorite WNBA memory. It can be from this season, from past seasons. Give us a little bit of explanation. We're going to be picking from the different applicants based on what connects to us, what kind of, pulls at a heartstring, or, whatever it
Creativity?
is,
Yeah.
creativity, whatever it is. Again, email REA, that's ARYEH at winsidr.com with your favorite WNBA memory, and big shout out to Homage. You can check our show notes for our affiliate link. All right, we have a different series going on the other side of the WNBA bracket. That's Minnesota, Connecticut. Minnesota, the top seed between these two. The Sun, in a impressive fashion, and to quote the great Rachel Galligan, in game one, beat Minnesota at their own game. To kind of read from my mind, they slapped them. They just smacked them in the face real hard. But then Minnesota bounces back and takes game two. And there was a lot of similarities in game two to game one, in the sense of it was physical, in the sense of we kind of got this understanding of, okay, we know what this series is going to be. Before we dive a little bit deeper in, Rachel, thoughts on this game, thoughts on game two, thoughts on the series as a whole as we prepare for game three?
I thought you brought up a really interesting point. I'm trying to pull it up on Twitter. A stat to watch for the Sun versus Lynx game. In the 3 wins the Sun have over Minnesota this season, they shot 40% or higher from 3. In the lone loss, they shot 35%. Okay, so much of this game comes down to the perimeter game. For me, that is because it's so even in so many other categories, right? In terms of, their poise, defensive, physicality. I mean, can we talk about Maisha Hines-Allen and Alyssa Thomas going at it? I literally woke up with back pains this morning just watching those two go head to head, just by the way. Like,
That was
God.
intense.
Good
That was
God.
intense.
Good God. I think this game, and that was a fascinating stat that you brought up to me yesterday. So much of it is determined by the three-point line. Connecticut Sun held to just 5 of 20 from the three-point line, 25%. That was the exact opposite of what we saw in game one, where I said Connecticut beat Minnesota at their own game. Minnesota, one of the top perimeter three-point shooting teams in the league, did not shoot it well. Connecticut did. You got Marina Maber going off for 6 threes. That didn't happen in game two. What happened in game two, Connecticut did what they have been all season long, which is not one of the best perimeter shooting teams in the league. Minnesota, 8 of 19, shot 42%. That's what they do. That is more at their style. That's what Minnesota does. And so, like, what I saw in game two was who these teams are. I mean, in game one, it felt like Connecticut played like Minnesota has all season long, but that's not who they are. So I'm not surprised. I definitely am fascinated with this matchup because, like, there's not a lot of margin for error with really either team, because this series and this matchup is so close. I think Connecticut filled the gap and they made it much closer with the Marina Mabrey trade. But it's hard, right? Because, like, you can make an argument for Connecticut, how experienced they are being in these series, in the playoffs, and big shots after big shots. This was not a great offensive performance from really either team. Connecticut, especially, only shooting 36%. Minnesota did shoot 45. Nafisa Collier only finished with 9 points, 3 of 14 from the field. So it's clear Connecticut was going to force someone else to beat them. But you've got Courtney Williams, who finished with 17. I mean, really, I feel like Minnesota's at their best when she's not pressing. And I felt like in game one, Courtney Williams was kind of pressing a little bit too much, especially down the stretch. In game two, she let the game come to her a little bit. Kayla McBride, only 1 of 4 from the three-point line, but still finished with 11. Alana Smith, 15. Bridget Carlton, 9. Nafisa Collier, 9. Maisha Hines-Allen was huge. Some big minutes, and just being able to help neutralize the physicality of Connecticut, finished with 7. So it's not like Minnesota played great. They didn't play. It's not like they shot the hell out of the ball and they had some crazy performances, but as a unit, top to bottom, they made some plays. I'm trying to look at just some other stats that I thought were fascinating to me. I mean, Connecticut won the points in the paint battle, 38-30. Second chance points were pretty even. Fast break points, Connecticut won. Minnesota at one point was up as much as 15. Turnovers were relatively even. Points off turnovers, I think Minnesota did a really good job of capitalizing on those. 15 points off of Connecticut's turnovers. I think that's an area that really, really hurt. Again, in a game with, it's a 3-possession game margin, but I don't know. I could really sit back right now and talk with you for a long time about this game and this matchup because, yeah, you could look at the rebounding. Yeah, you could look at, the different offensive struggles. But at the end of the day, to me, the most glaring stat, it falls back on that 3-point perimeter shooting.
I think if we're being honest, first let's start with Connecticut. Connecticut knew that their deficiencies in offense are the things that they need to address. If we want to zoom out more than just during season, I think there was some mistakes made in terms of front office moves building this roster because they essentially fell to the same trap that this team has fallen for many years. But mid-season completely shifts that by getting Marina Mabry, makes that big change. I'm almost inclined to look at the Connecticut Sun in the same way that I look at New York for last year, which was they didn't have enough time to get the flow. Marina is the perfect fit for this team, but I don't think they've had enough time together, and maybe they need a few more bench pieces, adjustments, to get to that point. I think what we've seen throughout this season and throughout, the past 5-6 seasons since 2017 is Connecticut is a great team. They are a top team in the league. They are, no question, not a middle tier team. They're going to contend. But when it gets to the playoffs, when we get to this point, you need to be able to produce offensively. They continue to build their roster with players that excel at either just defense or defense and driving to the hole. I'm sorry, you have Bree Jones, you have Alyssa Thomas. The paint's packed. You're not getting in there. You need shooters. You need someone to make DB's life a little bit easier so she can hit a couple big shots. You need somebody who's not going to, put more pressure on Carrington to be an offensive threat. This team's really good. It's not like they don't have quality depth. It's just offensively they struggle. If they're not going to be able to hit three, then they're really going to struggle against a team like Minnesota who can battle with them physically, who can battle with them in a defensive juggernaut matchup. And if I'm being honest, I almost think, I'll just say it. I think Connecticut is the hardest matchup in this league for Minnesota because of their ability to disrupt Minnesota offensively in so many different ways. And because of the style and skill set and the physical makeup of their roster, right? So having Duana Bonner with her length can really, really frustrate Nafisa Collier. They also have Alyssa Thomas with that physicality, which can throw certain players who like to play a little bit more finesse. Marina Mabry with, that style, that pizzazz, that in your face, that can kind of almost, she has that Diana Taurasi-esque, let me piss off the other team. Yeah. And when you piss me off, I'm going to get better because I have that edge, right? And so I look at this game and I think to myself, Minnesota's the better team. We've learned that throughout the season. Maybe that's offensive to Connecticut Sun fans. I'm sorry. We saw that throughout the season. It's why they have a better record and why they were seeded higher or better going into the playoffs. That doesn't mean Connecticut can't win it. We saw in game one. To me, game one was a great example of playoff experience versus lack, right? Minnesota went into it almost, and I don't know if we did this on the podcast, or we did this on the live stream with Bleacher Report. Everyone should check those out. But I was talking about this, to me, game one very much showed Connecticut's awareness of what round of the playoffs it was and what they're going up against and what they need to do. And Minnesota really struggled to kind of understand this is the next round. The competition is that much better, and each game is that much more intense. Minnesota by far did not play a great game. These teams, honestly, these teams have a lot of similarities, not in how they flow their offense, but in how they're able to just disrupt great offenses defensively, right? And so I look at them and I go, this is a great matchup. I could see this going 5. If I'm being blunt, I think Minnesota has turned the switch and they are by far the better team. And I think they sweep in Connecticut. Call me crazy, whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But I've always thought this is going to be 3-1 in a series. I think Minnesota is going to find a little bit better shooting. And Natisha Heidemann and Courtney Williams would love to send Connecticut packing in Connecticut. The two other things I want to say, Maisha Hines-Allen, the ability, like you said, to neutralize the physicality of Alyssa Thomas and the Connecticut Sun and be that hockey style enforcer. So important. Also important, Zandalacini. Chechi gets 17 minutes, only goes 1 for 2 from 3-point line, just 5 points, gets to the free throw line also. But what she does impact wise in the pace of the game and what she does in terms of alleviating some pressure from some of the other shooters on this team. And that's what this team does so well is when one player hits a shot, you know that they can get hot quickly. So you kind of need to focus more so on them. It eases you off of their other players and their other threats, which allows them to hit other shots. And that's how the flow of this team works in a way that makes it really hard for other teams to counter them. I think Connecticut can counter them in terms of defensive actions. I don't know if Vegas or New York has that ability just yet.
I'm doing math right now real quick. 7 plus 5. What, we got 12. Okay, so 16-4 in bench points. Minnesota Lynx compared to Connecticut Sun. It's just a lot of strain, and it's easier to try to contain a four-headed monster because, and we're talking about Bree Jones being in the starting lineup too, she hit one shot. I mean, she had 2 points, played 13 minutes. And this was a player at one point who was most improved and having one of the greatest seasons of her career just a couple of years ago. So, I know that the paint is clogged, but like that is a high percentage point getter that has not been utilized for whatever reason, and so like that's alarming. And so you've basically got a four-headed monster in Connecticut right now. And it's a lot of strain. Hope that, Dewana Bonner is going to shoot a high percentage consistently through the course of a playoff. Alyssa Thomas, she's going to give you what she gives you. But yeah, she's easy to scheme against because of her range and her limited ability at this point. Not that she's easy to play against. There's a difference of playing and scheming. In terms of the percentage of shots that she's getting and the way you guard her, you're able to pack the paint more. Dejanay Carrington, Marina Mabry. I think that Connecticut just has so much strain on those four. And I said it the last time we talked, Ty Harris being out and played 6 minutes the other night. This hurts Connecticut in their depth exceptionally well because that's a player that's averaging 10 points per game, night in and night out through the course of the season, someone that they could be relied upon. Doesn't need to be your third or fourth scorer, but can come in and just stretch the defense and be a different offensive weapon. Not having Ty Harris hurts Connecticut big time. Now, it'll be interesting. How does she integrate back into this after being out for a little bit? Does she go in on Friday and get more minutes and is able to? I think a lot of Connecticut's success is going to hinge on that. But yeah, I mean, you just look. Minnesota they're deeper right now. They're more consistent. I think I'm gonna push back on you. I think this can go to 5. I think I fall back from my actual prediction versus just speaking it into existence because I want it. So I really do think that this can go to 5. I think that it should go to 5 because of just how the defensive pressure that both of these teams provide. I think that every night is going to be a complete dogfight between these two. If we have a night where it's like an offensive clinic and people, we're scoring into the 90s, you're going to have two coaches that are going to go in the locker room after it and be pissed off of, that they didn't play their type of defensive game. And so this should be a dogfight. There should be some tough shooting performances. It is going to come down to the tiny percentages and numbers, whether it's perimeter shooting, points in the paint, things like that. So I think that Connecticut has enough. I don't know that they can win 3. I feel like just right now, especially maybe recency bias coming off the last game, Minnesota, just from a depth perspective and from a weapon perspective, they just have too much. But I like this series going to 5.
2, because I love to argue with myself, to Rachel's point, if you look at the 5 games so far played by Minnesota and Connecticut in the regular season and postseason, the point differential is 0. That's a little wild stat that I saw. So maybe we are going 5. Rachel, thanks for joining me. Remind the folks, who's your GOAT?
Let's stick with it, Diana Taurasi.